Welcome everyone to the National University of Singapore's Middle East Institute Salon series. The MEI Salon series is where we run events in a more casual and relaxed setting, aimed at making the region and its culture more accessible to everyone. We're joined today by a very special individual, Miss Charlene Winfred. Charlene was born and raised in Singapore and spent most of her adult years in Australia. But in 2013, she left a settled life for one on the road, and in 2019 moved to Kurdistan, the autonomous Kurdish region in northern Iraq. There, she worked for a year with a small humanitarian NGO, helping refugees rebuild their lives amid the long shadow of war. Charlene also happens to be an amazing photographer, and we are very glad to have her here today to share with us stories and photographs from a time in Iraq. Charlene will speak first, and then we can do a Q&A with the audience. So over to you, Charlene. The floor is yours.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you all so much for being here. I'm gonna jump straight into my presentation today. Okay. Now hang on, I can't seem to move my slide. Give me a tick. Okay. I first heard about Iraq when I was about 10 or 11 years old. News had broken out that Iraq had attacked this tiny neighbor, Kuwait, and the US was sending its military in to Kuwait's aid. Now, if you're younger than me, the first time you might have heard of Iraq was during the 2003 US invasion. Among other things, they were on the hunt for weapons of mass destruction that were never found. So when I say Iraq, pictures like these might come to mind. Or this. This is the old city of Mosul from the banks of the Tigris River. Mosul was captured by the Islamic State in 2014, and ISIS named it their Iraqi capital of the caliphate. 2017, Iraqi forces drove ISIS out of Mosul, but in the ensuing battle, a lot of the old city was destroyed. Old Mosul is ancient. It's 1,000 years old. And to see it in ruin like this is absolutely heartbreaking. If you've been following the news in the last year, you might have seen headlines like this. There's been a lot that's been happening in Iraq over the last year. There's continuous also shelling from Iran and, of course, Turkey, that never makes it to, or doesn't make it much to international news as well. But have you seen this? This was winter in Sulaymaniyah last year. Oh, this year actually, January this year. And what about scenes like this? Or what about scenes like this? I didn't think I'd be attending a rave in Kurdistan somehow when I first got there last year. This was a pretty epic one in the grounds of a disused tobacco factory right in the center of the city, which had been repurposed as a creative space. And there were beautiful scenes like this in Baghdad. And when you think Iraq, what do you think? You think desert, right? That's certainly what I thought before I ever went there. But scenes like this also exist there. Now, in this picture for scale, if you look at the top of the mountain near the center of the frame, those little white and brown pixels are actually sheep. If you bring your eye over to the right of the frame, you'll see a truck on top of the ridgeline. And if you look really carefully somewhere to the right center of the frame, you can see two guys actually catching a break on the slope of the mountain. All of these pictures that I've showed you live inside the borders of the country we know today as Iraq. these are scenes we don't see in the news. So, hello, I'm Charlene. As I was introduced earlier by Tatiana, I was born and raised in Singapore. I left Singapore in 1999 for Australia and stayed there till about 2013. That was when I left Australia, ostensibly on a year-long sabbatical from my then banking job. That sabbatical turned from 1 year to 2, 2 years to 3, 7 years on, I'm still on a sabbatical. It's funny how life takes you, isn't it? But last January, I moved to Iraq to take up a job as a communications officer for a small humanitarian organization called Preemptive Love Coalition. So I moved to Iraq in January last year, and I lived there until March this year when I came home to Singapore. So I've been away from Singapore now for 21 years. This is the first talk I've ever given back here at home. I'm so grateful to the Middle Eastern Institute of Singapore for having me, and for all of you who are taking time, out of your day, who've woken up early from different parts of the world to actually join me here. So thank you very, very much for being here. Okay, so a little bit of background on the organization I work with, because this is pertinent to the rest of the talk. Preemptive Love Coalition works with refugees and displaced peoples in Syria, in Lebanon, Venezuela, Mexico, and of course, Iraq. We help fast in emergency situations, like when the Beirut blast happened on the 4th of August this year. We look to give help that lasts in the form of job creation. And undergirding the core of everything we do is healing for peace. So we bring people together, we build communities around the world that work towards peace. And I'm pretty sure in the wake of the pandemic this year, well, not in the wake really, we're still in the midst of it, of the pandemic this year, and all of the protests and unrest that's going around all over the world, I'm pretty sure everybody here would agree that we really do need peace. And we need it more than ever. So Preemptive Love started in Iraq 12 years ago. And that was where I was based all of last year. I was based specifically in the autonomous Kurdish region in the north of the country. The blue segment that you see at the top of Iraq, there's the official Kurdish territory. There are, of course, disputed areas that are not marked on my map. And my job as a comms officer entailed 3 main duties. I wrote stories for all of our online platforms, so main websites, social accounts, and so on. I make videos, and I also make photographs. I've been a photographer now in some capacity or the other for just over 10 years. And despite everything else that I do, photographs are still the heart and soul of my work. And as I work for Preemptive Love, the heart and soul of those photographs are the most vulnerable people of where I am, which in Iraq are refugees and internally displaced people, sorry. So I've shown you a lot of beautiful sights in the lead up to this presentation, just like this one. This is the evening view from my old apartment in Ileane. But of course, not everybody lives like this. So for the last 40 or so years, Iraq's been either at war or working through war's aftermath, as has a lot of its neighbors. So at the end of 2019, there were just under 280,000 refugees in the country from all over the world, and 1.4 million internally displaced Iraq, according to UNHCR, which is the United Nations Refugee Agency. So what's the difference between a refugee and an internally displaced person? A refugee is someone who has crossed international borders to look for safety. When they are officially designated refugees, they come under the protection of UNHCR, or the United Nations Refugee Agency. And this means they're able to access funding and protection and the resources of the UN. Now, just in case this sounds like a great deal, news coverage, studies of refugees for decades have shown that life is difficult as a refugee. It's not easy to lose something and to start again somewhere where you're, in a lot of cases, not welcome. But they do have some protections. Quite frequently in Iraq, they have access to camps built to provide shelter and a little bit of food as well. With internally displaced people, these are people who have lost their homes and have fled to elsewhere in the country. So they don't cross, people don't cross international borders but remain in their own country. These are internally displaced people. Now, this may sound like a better situation because at least you're at home, right? But in reality, it's much more difficult because a country at war has extremely limited resources to help displaced people, or anyone really. And also, internally displaced people are not under UN protection, so they don't have resources they don't have access to the resources that are provided by United Nations funds. So people within Iraq who have become internally displaced because of, say, war or the violence with ISIS, they do face serious challenges to survive. Okay, so I've just shown you a picture of what the main street of a in displacement camp for internally displaced people looks like. This is a close-up of what a typical home in camp looks like. It is not easy living. These are just plastic shielded tents. A lot of them have extensions built, as you can see on the right of the frame, by wooden poles and such. They are freezing in the wintertime and boiling in the summer. And in Kurdistan, summers reach 46, 47 degrees. Winters frequently drop to freezing or below freezing. So life's hard. But today, I'm here to talk to you about refugees and internally displaced people that I work with. Most of the stories I will share with you today are of internally displaced Iraqis, like Buthina. So Buthina is the lady you can see at the center of the frame in the white polo tee. That's her mother at the leftmost of the frame and her mom's friend that they share a salon space with at the right of the frame. So this is a salon space that exists in a camp of roughly 10,000 displaced individuals. So Buthina comes from a town in central Iraq that was destroyed by Islamic State or ISIS. She was pregnant when ISIS invaded her hometown. And as if that wasn't bad enough, her husband abandoned her after baby number 5 came along. So life's complicated, right? Even for all of us here or who live in stable, secure nations who are generally quite comfortable every day. Relationships are complicated. There's family tensions, nagging health concerns, marital issues. And these don't stop just because there's war. They don't stop because there's literal life or death situation at hand. Very often they're exacerbated by loss and destruction and other massive stresses that war imposes on people. So this was the case for Buthina. With her husband gone, she and her kids only had her mother for support. So in Iraq, men are still the traditional breadwinners in the household. But with so many men lost to war, the women are now working to provide for their families. But the social and economic barriers are still extremely high. I'm just going to pause my presentation for a little bit because I'm actually hearing some noise. Does anybody hear that too? Is somebody unmuted? Can you hear some noise in the background? No? Okay, it's gone. Great. Thank you. Okay, where was I? All right. Men are the traditional breadwinners in the household for most of Iraq. So with so many men lost to the war, women, of course, now are stepping up to provide for their kids. But of course, social and economic barriers are still extremely high. And more so for people who live in refugee or displacement camps, because there's thousands of people vying for a handful of jobs. And these are not people who have a car or, near public transport that they can take a bus into the nearest city to look for work. No. Refugee camps, displacement camps are generally not in convenient locations which are well served by public transport. They're generally in quite isolated areas, and it's difficult to go to and from large cities. So, but you know what? Little ones need to be fed. Money needs to be made to put food on the table, to send kids to school, to be safer for the future. So mothers do what mothers do all over the world. They get on with it. They find a way. And so Buthena came to us for help. Now, one of the core programs that Preemptive Love has is to help people find jobs. Buthena wanted to start a salon. So our donors gave her $1,000 to do so. And this bought, as you can see in the photo, a place in camp to put up a new tent. It also bought her the tools, the products, and the furniture that she needed. That's Buthena, her mom, shopping for salon supplies in the bazaar. Now, displacement is rarely a short-term situation. Most of the people in this camp come from the same area in central Iraq that Buthena did. In 2014 to 2015, the Islamic State came along and destroyed their homes, their livelihoods, and in many cases, their entire world. Most have been here for 4 or 5 years or more. And if the camps continue being here, too many will remain for the next 5, 10, 15 years. We've recently gotten information that the Iraqi government is looking to actually close internal displacement camps. And that raises another huge set of problems on its own, because we're talking about hundreds of thousands of Iraqis who will again be displaced and possibly have nowhere to go because they can't return. There's no home waiting for them in their city. There are sectarian tensions that might not allow them to return. There's a lack of resources. There's a whole host of problems there. So yeah, we don't know we don't know a whole lot about that right now, but we're going to be finding out more and responding as the situation arises. But back to Buthena. So life goes on. Kids go to school. People look for work. Women continue the private rituals that are so much a part of who they are all over the world. When Buthena started the salon business, it was the only salon in a camp of 10,000 people. So it quickly became more than a space to, get your skin cared for, your eyebrows tattooed, or made up for a celebration or whatever. It was also a space where women came together to share their lives. It was a safe space for women. Women in Iraq, I want to say, don't have the same freedoms that we enjoy here in Singapore and so much of the rest of the world. So to have safe spaces outside the home is huge. It's very, very, very important. It's very much a part of community life. Okay, so Buthena's salon was a big hit. 2 months after the launch of her business, we paid her a visit to catch up and see how she was doing. She told us that her business was so good that she was able to invest $500 of her profit to attend a month-long training course in Baghdad, so she could expand her salon's offering. So this is really great for us to see our business owners reinvest their profits into their business to expand and to make the business bigger, more viable, more sustainable. So the last I heard at the end of last year, Buthena was planning to go back to her hometown to rebuild her family's life there. I don't know if this is true. I certainly hope that she did end up going back there, and that life's getting better for her and all of her children there. So I think in the year that I've been with, in the almost 2 years I've been with Preemptive Love, I think that the one thing I've learned is just how resilient people are. Sometimes all people need are just a small helping hand to get over that big hurdle of, trying to start a shop when you have no money. Sometimes all it takes is a little bit of money and go, here, start your shop and go. And business owners like Buthina have shown us that they're capable of doing this. They just need a little bit of help. People are resilient. Women are resilient. Like Buthina is resilient. And so is Amuna. So Amuna fled central Iraq with 6 children when the Islamic State approached. Then her husband passed away after they came to camp. So for the longest time, she relied on the goodwill of her neighbors and a very, very small aid stipend to sort of keep the family's body and soul together. So she had 6 or more mouths to feed, actually, with the grandchildren, including medical costs for a sick daughter. So there was never enough money, and she did what a lot of displaced people do. She borrowed. And it was a horrible situation to be in. Amuna had been trying to get her business off the ground for the longest time when we met her. She'd been a farmer back in her hometown, but in camp, she turned to making doshaks. So they're the long floor cushions that are in many traditional Iraqi homes, and certainly also in the tents that serve as homes in camp. So Amuna was pretty successful. She had plenty of customers because she was really good at business. But she always had to borrow to buy supplies, which meant that a big chunk of her profit went back to paying debtors, which was incredibly frustrating, as you can probably sympathize with. So what she needed was a little bit of help with initial startup costs. So our donors really helped her out. $1,000 got her all the cotton and fabric and other equipment that she needed. And Amuna was off to a flying start. In the photo, you can see these are the huge bags of cotton that we went to a factory to get for her the day that we brought her shopping to start her business. And so some weeks later, we stopped by in her shop to see how she was doing, say hello, just find out what the situation is. And of course, we walked in and she was thriving. So business was so good that 2 of her daughters were helping her out in the shop. So that's a 2 of them there, because her demand was so great she could no longer cope with it on her own. And where she previously made only doshaks to order, the long floor cushions, then she had then started expanding her product range to include like other varieties of cushions as well. And then she also started stocking her shop with pre-made cushions, so customers could just come in and buy one off the shelf if they wanted. Now, when I first moved to Iraq, Amuna was the person that made the mattress that I slept on for a few months while I was on the hunt for a suitable bed. I think for that reason, I look at this photo that's on screen now, and the day that we went to visit her, and she was telling us, thank God, you were there, and you were all there, and that you helped us out because we're doing so much better. We have no debt. The business is doing really great. It's now become a family business, so my daughters have work to do as well. And that was just super, super great to see. Super great to hear. It was really, really nice to be a part of. This is Nifa. Nifa's story is a little bit different. So everyone else I've spoken about before had been displaced from their home by the Islamic State. But Nifa's husband was killed in 2003 during the US invasion by an American soldier. So a lot of the times, those of us in the humanitarian world, it's easy for us to think that we're helping people who are suffering because of the bad guys. Because the bad guys are never us. But Preemptive Love is an American organization. And that's really confronting, because that's to come face to face with our complicity in the wars that happen. And I think this is something for all of us to consider, no matter where we come from, because it's where, this is sometimes the effect of the products or that we consume, where they come from, and what the cost of their production is in local communities. Stories like Nifa's were really what brought my organization to Iraq in the first place. It's what drives us, or it's what drives our commitment to peace, our continuing commitment to peace. Because it starts with small steps, like starting businesses for widows like Nifa, so she can send her children to school, so that they can equip themselves with the tools to rebuild their lives, their homes, their communities, and their nation. So Nifa wanted to start a mamak shop, so a convenience store, selling a little bit of everything. So from sweets to potato chips to daily groceries like milk and vegetables and whatnot. This is her on the day the shop was open. Big grin, had it on her face all day when we went to see her, and had her shop all stocked, and she was so excited, so excited. It was also Ramadan at the time, the month of fasting for Muslims around the world. So Nifa's brother-in-law, whom she lived with, and some of his friends had come to help her set up shop. So they built the tent that her shop is in. And on the day that she opened, they also came to help stock the shelves, etc. And so her brother-in-law, once the shelves were stocked, stopped and asked her, so what about iftar? So iftar is the meal that breaks the fast after sunset during Ramadan. So Nifa, with that huge smile on her face, turned around and told her brother-in-law, what of iftar? I'll think about feeding you when it's iftar. For now, I have a new shop to work on today. This is my future. And that was it. She put her foot down. He laughed. And that, you can't look at that face and tell me that it's not nice to be a part of that. Because I think for so many of us that do this work, that smile is a reward, is so much of a reward. Speaking of smiles, I laugh every time I see this photo, because I remember this visit, and it was just one of the best visits ever. So this is Kawakep, and this photo was taken in her shop, which sells fabric. So she was one of our business owners that we started a fabric store for her because that was what she wanted to do. So when we first met Kawakep, she was nothing like the woman in the photo. She was reserved, she was hesitant, she didn't say very much, and she was spoken for by her mother-in-law. So Kawakep was already a widow, living with her late husband's family by the time ISIS came and destroyed their homes and displaced them to this camp. So in most of Iraq, when a woman marries a man, she becomes his family's responsibility. But for Kawakep, though, living with her in-laws in their old home and also here in camp, meant that her life was heavily curbed by the family's rules, with little thought given to her own wishes. So when we met her to discuss her future fabric business, she didn't really have a chance to speak. She was really overshadowed by her dominant mother-in-law. But once we started the business, though, we saw another side of Kawakep emerge. The businesswoman who shone with pleasure, like when she made decisions about what she wanted in her shop. She was just waiting for the opportunity to be the boss. By the time the business was up and running, we were greeted by an entirely different Kawakep. The one who, like in the photo, could not stop smiling every time we dropped in to visit, to say hello, see how she's going. Big smile on her face, stay there the entire visit. So despite its small size, so her shop is a tent that's maybe about 2 by 2 meters, maybe a slight bit bigger at the most. She has been swamped with business from the start. So in a few short weeks after her business started, she was already expanding from selling just fabrics into selling women and children's clothing, and she could barely keep up with the demand. At the time of this visit, she was telling us that she was making daily trips into town to restock her wares. And I think for us to watch her move around her shop and be such a boss about the whole thing was just wow. She went from being so quiet and so reserved and just so still to just being completely animated. So here in this shot, those are my colleagues, Inas on the left and Ashley on the right, and all three of us are just dying with laughter because there's Kao kept holding court in the middle of the shop, telling us any number of funny mother-in-law stories. Once she started her shop, she put her foot down and told the mother-in-law, "No, this is my shop, and I get to say in what's happening here, and only I get to say in what's happening here." One of the great things about hearing Kawakep's story also was she was telling us, so she has a son and he goes to school. And when we came to visit around this time, she told us, now when my son goes to school, I can give him 1 or 2,000 dinars to go every day so he can, buy something from the shop to eat if he wants and stuff like that. She's never been able to do this before because she had no money, she had no job, and her in-laws just would say no. So by having this shop, she got her independence back, she got agency over her life back, and she got her confidence back. I think as a woman, for me to see this happening to other women it strikes a very special chord. So I think this is what most of us women want in life and work very, very hard to achieve in life. So I've talked now a lot about coming to visit our business owners from time to time in the shop. So when Primitive Love starts businesses for shop owners, it's not like we just go out, buy things with them, chuck it in the shop and go, okay, see you later, have a great time. It is a relationship that we form with them, and often it's a relationship that goes on for many, many years. There's always constant, we coach them through businesses, we're always there to help them through, if they run into issues, we're always there to help them try and find solutions to their problems. We're there to commiserate when something goes wrong, and we're also there to celebrate when things go right, because that's absolutely part of what you do with your relationships or with the people that you're in relationship with. Okay, so I could tell stories all day, but I'm gonna end my storytelling with this little girl. This is Ileane. She's, at the time I took this photo in the middle of the year last year, she was 6 years old. Ileane is from Syria. She moved, her mom and dad ran away, had to flee their home. Sorry, not ran away. They did run away from ISIS. They come from the north of Syria, and they are Kurdish people. And their homes were destroyed by ISIS in 2014. So life in camp is all Ileane has ever known. This is Ileane's mom, Silva. Silva is one of our makers, so she makes the candles that we sell in our shop. And Ileane is very, very cute. She was one of the very first Syrians that I ever met. And when I met her, it was because we went to do a shoot at her mom's place for candle making. So she was like this cute, tiny little girl, and she was staring at me the moment I walked into the house. So I thought, oh, it's cute. She likes me. I was disabused of that notion very, 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 very quickly. Oh, there's Ileane having tea with us. So she was very, very shy. So she was always peeping out at us from behind a wall, or in the room, or behind her mum. And then once we finished the shoot, we all sat down to drink tea. And so she kept looking over, and she was really, really curious. And so eventually, as we sat there, we were talking with her mum and some of my colleagues. She finally crawled really close enough so that she was touching me. Eventually, she came and sat in my lap, and I was just, my heart just melted. I don't spend a lot of time with small children, so I'm not used to this amount of cuteness. It's quite near me. So I thought, it's really cute. She likes me. It turned out it wasn't me she was after. She had been staring at the two cameras that were hanging from my shoulders the entire time I was working. I would pick up one. There are cameras with different lenses on there for different focal lengths for the photographers among us. I use two so I don't have to change lenses in the middle of the shoot. It's just more efficient that way. And she had been watching me like a hawk the entire time. I would pick up one camera, take a shot, put it down, pick up the other one, take another shot, put it down. By the time she came to sit next to me, she'd reached for my camera. And so here's my rules. I don't put my camera in the hands of anybody who is generally younger than 18. Now, the reason of this being, if they break it, they can go work and buy me a new one. So I don't know what happened. She picked up my camera and said, okay, she can have it. Why not? So I thought, later on I went home and I thought, wow, that's really out of character for me. And then of course I did it again. So, but she's a pro, Ileane. Check out how she's holding that camera. For the photographers among us, you'll notice that her index finger is on the shutter button. She figured out that if you depress the shutter button also lightly, the autofocus is triggered and you can focus on what it is you want to take a picture of. So I said before that I don't spend a lot of time with young children. I don't. I'm not used to how precocious they can be. So within an hour, the shoot itself, while we were there, probably took maybe 45 minutes all up. And she'd been watching me that whole 45 minutes. And in that 45 minutes, she had watched me closely enough to figure out how to work the camera. So by the time she picked it up, she figured out how to trigger the focus, how to take a photo, how to review the photo and the LCD at the back of the camera, and then how to deactivate the LCD so the camera's in shooting mode again. And you know what? I went back that day and looked through my files and saw that she'd taken photos like this. 1 hour with the camera was all she needed. I mean, I myself, today, after 10 years of shooting, would have been proud to call a photo like this my own, but it's not. It came from a little 6-year-old who was playing with the camera and, of course, pointed it at the things that were closest to her heart. And then she took more. I was amazed. And I think what this makes me think of is if 1 hour with a camera, you know, if Ileane can produce this after 1 hour with a camera when she's never touched one before, imagine what she could do in a year. She's 6. What she could do in a year, what she could do in 10 years, what she would be doing by the time she's 25 if given the access and the opportunity. So I'm gonna end my stories here with that cute little girl. Also wanted to share some photos of my team. So I never go out in the field on my own. I usually go out with a team. These two ladies are Ashley, who's from the States, and Inas, who's from Iraq, from Baghdad, as I mentioned earlier. So the three of us worked extensively together with starting refugee businesses, etc., all through the course of last year. It's always a lot of fun working with them. I have a ton of pictures. We've shared a ton of laughs. Um, and also, when you're in a relationship with people over a long span of time, your business owners start becoming a little more than business owners. They become people you know, they become your neighbors, they're part of your community. Oh, my slides are frozen. Okay, there we go. So here's Inas with Ahmed and his wife. They, at the time of this photo, I think it was somewhere in the middle of last year, had just had a new baby. And they named their new little girl Inas, after the lady that always came around to help them, to say hello, and to always just make sure they were doing okay. It was a very, very emotional day for Inas, the grown Inas, that day. I think she was really overwhelmed by the honor of having their child named after her, and it was just a really great moment, in amongst the hardships and the difficult situations that exist in camp. These are Preemptive Love's founders, Jessica and Jeremy Courtney, during Jessica's birthday last year. That is another birthday celebration in the office. Sarah, who turned the ripe old age of, I think, 23 or 24. And here is Afnan, one of our interns from the US, who's now also a colleague, teaching English at the Syrian refugee camp. And right there is Preemptive Love's resident Iraqi filmmaker, Ihsan. Ihsan and I are the people in the Iraqi office who would start our day on many days with a full discussion for an hour about the latest and greatest in camera gear. We're both huge nerds, and we can talk about cameras all day, every day, if we're given half an opportunity. I believe Ihsan is actually in the audience right now, so hello. Great, it's great that you're here, buddy. And so I've come to the end of my talk. I've thought long and hard about what I wanted to leave you with. So it feels like the world's is becoming more polarized every day. Everyone, no matter who they are, where they're from, where they are, feels like they're being attacked. But I think with all of the conflict that's happening everywhere, the protests, the wars, the only way it's going to get better is if we make it better, one person at a time. Statistics are overwhelming. I checked the UNHCR website just before coming onto this call, and we are somewhere around the vicinity of 80 million displaced people in the world today. That's overwhelming. How does one person affect the lives of 80 million for the better, right? But we've seen, especially now in times of crisis, that we have the capacity to reach out and help the person next door who needs it, right? In COVID has changed a lot of our lives, and it's also brought to the realization that we have the power to affect our neighbors. And I think this is what we need to hang on to, because what we do as individuals has the power to change the lives of the people around us. Everyday kindness counts for a lot, because no one knows what the next person is going through every day. So as difficult as it is, especially in times of stress, if we're kind to one person, that's one splash in the great ocean of humanity that might cause ripples that we never get to see, but could make all the difference in someone's life, and they could pass that on. So thank you for staying with me for this time. If you want to learn more about my organization, go to preemptivelove.org. If you want to find out more about me, that's my website there, or you can simply Google my name. I'm very, very easily found on the internet. So thank you all very much. And I'm open for questions if anybody has any.
Charlene, thank you. I really enjoyed it, and I think everyone else did as well. Let me just say, you're not only an amazing photographer, but you're a really good storyteller too. Okay, so we have time. We can take some questions now. So to the audience, if you'd like to ask Charlene a question, just use the raise hand button on your Zoom toolbar. Christopher Pook, you can go ahead to unmute yourself. Can go ahead and go ahead.
My only question is, when are you going to come back? Because Iraq misses you.
Hey, Chris, glad you made it. Thanks for coming. I'm not actually allowed back in the country right now. Singaporeans are still banned from entering Iraq. But you know what? I am going to come back the moment that I can, because I miss it. I miss it in a really, really big way, as you probably were able to tell. So hopefully it won't be too long before I get to see you.
Awesome.
Okay, Charlene, maybe I'll just ask you a question that came to mind earlier. What was the youth demographic like when you were working in the camp? Maybe can you share a bit on that? Your organization worked with any young women, and what were their sentiments, their aspirations?
So I'm not actually aware of what the demographics in the camps were that we worked in, because we didn't work with 10,000 people. We worked with a few business owners, but those were the relationships we nurtured. Now, that being said, Iraq itself is a very, very young country. So I believe something like close to 60% of Iraq is under the age of 25. And so that's a really, really young country. I don't know if people here have been following the news, but when you think about the fact that 60% of the country is 25 or under, the massive unemployment rate for youth really has a nationwide impact. Because I think, depending on the statistics that you listen to, youth unemployment is anywhere between 16 to 25%. COVID's had a huge impact on Iraq's economy. I'm not an economist and I don't read numbers, but as much as COVID's had an impact in more resilient economies in the world, economies like Iraq's, which are already shaken by so many decades of war and sanctions and already having such a hard time with all the political turmoil, etc., it's likely to bring Iraq. It could bring Iraq to its knees if not addressed. So, as far as sentiments go, so most of the women that I shared about, like Buthina and Silva, Ileane's mom. So Ileane's mom is 24 or 25 this year. Buthina, I don't know, I would say, I can't honestly remember. She's probably around 30. So many of the women we work with are somewhere in the late 20s or maybe up to mid 30s. Amuna's a little older because she has grown children. But yeah, so they're all, we do work with a lot of young women, and the young women are the ones who are like, I have a future. Help me to get there. So this is what we have committed to do, because usually we've seen as well in so many years of being in Iraq, is when you help a woman, that woman helps her community. So if you help widows, they help everyone around them. So, women are resilient, but they're also tough as hell.
Showed us a lot of pictures. Do you have a particular favorite that you have from your time in Iraq? Maybe share with us the story behind it.
I can do that. Okay, let me just share my screen again. Hang on. There we go. Okay. So I really like. Oh, wait, hang on. Let me just close my screen. I'm sorry. I don't appear to know how to work technology today. There we go. Let me full screen that. So I really like this picture. And so I didn't take this picture on a job. So I am an ambassador for camera brand Fujifilm. And last year, they released a new camera. And
did you manage to screen share?
Oh, did I manage to screen share? Hang on. Is that not screen sharing? Yeah. Let me just try that again. Okay, is that shared now?
Yeah.
Okay. So okay, let me start again. I really like this one. So I didn't take this one on the job. Last year, as I mentioned, I'm a Fujifilm ambassador. And last year I was part of the big release project for a brand new camera that they were debuting. And so as part of this project, I had to share some sample images with Fuji and the world of photos taken with the new camera, and we also had to get a video made. So Ileane was the filmmaker that made my video, and as part of making that video, the two of us were just exploring Sulaymaniyah, the city that we're based in, because I think when I got to Kurdistan, I got there in January. It was winter, and it was green because it'd been raining and raining. I think the year that I got there might have been one of the rainiest they'd had on record for like 30 years or something. And it was all through the region, Syria and Iran and stuff. There were massive floods happening everywhere. But what also happens when it rains is that, it gets really green. And so I was really taken aback by just how gorgeous it is. So the Kurdish, most of the Kurdish regions, so the land that the Kurdish people have lived in for centuries, perhaps millennia, is spread over what is now Turkey, Syria, Iran, and Iraq mostly. And most of it is mountainous. So Kurdish people have a saying that they have no friends but the mountains. They've been oppressed for a very, very long time. And it's always the mountains that give them shelter. And so Kurdistan in Iraq is also gorgeous and mountainous, and there are two mountain ranges that flank the city of Sulaymaniyah. So in this shot, you will see the whole city laid out in front of us. And when I first got there, I was just so breathtaking by how beautiful it was. And this photo, I think for me, is just an appreciation of how dramatic and how beautiful the land is. I will say that the photo does absolutely no justice to the actual scene. To be at the top of this mountain looking down the city at sunset like these guys are is to really understand how you are a part of something greater, that you are absolutely a part of the land on which you live. So yeah, this is one of my favorites, I think, from the time, and I come back to it often, and I always, when I look at some of these photos I've taken, I always think, yeah, I have to go back there because there's just so much about it. I mean, I'm a city girl. I've lived in big cities all my life, but in certain cases, certainly as it was in Suli, I get on top of a mountain and I go, I need this. This is absolutely what I want to understand more of in my life. So yeah.
I think it's really great that you managed to combine like your passion and skill and put it into something meaningful at the same time. I mean, as a photographer, you hope you can influence people to kind of take action and, I mean, to show the conditions in Iraq, as you said. Yeah, how could you say something?
Well, I'm not a photojournalist, so I don't shoot for the media, and I don't chase those stories either. I think, oh, that's a really good question. I've thought about it quite a lot over the years, what it is I hope to do with photography. And honestly, I think for me it's just I hope with photography to encourage people to look a little differently, to look beyond what they're being fed in the news, to go and see for themselves. You can actually travel to Kurdistan. Tourism is a big part of Kurdistan. It's very, very beautiful, especially in the spring. I very much encourage people to visit during the springtime. It's gorgeous. Just go for a walk in the mountains. The landscape is amazing, and the light for those of you out there who are photographers, the light at those latitudes is second to none. So, yeah.
Thanks. I have a question from Miss Emily Lowe. She's asking about how about the lives of the internally displaced men? Not sure if you had the opportunity to work with, IDPs, male IDPs.
Yeah, so we started businesses for men and women. I want to say it's the same, right? Because they're all part of the same communities and they've all been displaced, etc. A lot of the men, when they have the opportunity to work, a lot of them actually work as like, what's the word I'm looking for? Probably like laborers, if that makes sense. You go to building sites and do, labor like that. We've started businesses for many men, from poultry shops to photography and a coffee shop. Again, there's always a need for grocery shops or like mamat stores who would sell a little bit of everything for the immediate community around them. And yeah, that's much the same. The men I think are by default expected to provide for the family. So a lot of men have. There was a story I didn't end up sharing about one of our business owners who ended up running an electrical store. He needed to provide for something like 12 people. So his kids, in-laws, etc. So, I mean, they're the same. Everybody works really, really hard because at the end of the day, I think most people, like pretty much everybody here, just wants to have a home, have a life, save a little bit for the future, leave something for our kids, just leave them with a better world, really. So, did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think so. I have a question. Asif, my colleague, senior research fellow at the Institute, Asif Shuja, he's going to ask a question. Asif, go ahead.
Thank you, Tati. Charlene, it's a scary feeling talking before you because you observe life so deeply, and not just that, you in fact communicate the entire feeling through your work, photography. Looking at your work, in this regard, I was reminded of a story, very very short story, which can draw a parallel. Once at night, there was a huge tide in the sea, and thousands and thousands of fish. They were, driven to the sand. So just before sunrise, a man was just jogging, and then he saw this scenery, and he thought that all these fish will die as soon as the sun rises. So what he did, he started picking up fish one by one and throwing them back to the water. Then there was other person who was passing by. He was also aghast to see this, and then he asked this man, "What are you doing? I mean, there are thousands and thousands of fish. What difference can you possibly make?" This man simply smiled, threw one fish in the water, and he said, "This will make difference in the life of this fish." And I think this is what you have been doing. seeing the refugee, their condition, I mean, it's really a bad feeling. But I see that you have given hope, even for people like us that who see these videos, these images, and for our research purpose, we do it all the time. We have I can personally thank you for giving us a way to feel good about it by doing something maybe. And I think in the same way, the name is so catchy that you have given to your organization, whoever has given it, Preemptive Love. I think you can go to the proponent of preemptive war and ask him for donation of at least $1. I think that will make difference in the life of that person. You know that who that person is, right? So I can just say thank you for the time that I have spent with you, with your work. Thank you so much. Thank you, Tepi.
Thanks, Asif. Yeah, I think it's great because through your work, you can show, and through this talk as well, we can show a different side of Iraq and of the Middle East in general. I don't see any questions from the audience at the moment. You mentioned that the Salon became a sort of a safe space for women. Butina Salon. I'm just curious, what did they talk about most? I mean, what were they preoccupied with? Quite curious.
Well, honestly, I couldn't tell you. There were a lot of naughty things being said. So I don't speak Arabic,
Okay.
and Arabic is what they mainly speak. So my colleague Inas, that you saw in several of the slides, she usually translates for us. And so when she's in conversation, she's not often able to translate what was being said. But, and let me just share one of my screens. Hang on a sec. Okay. Now, can you see that photo?
Yeah.
So I took this photo one afternoon. Me, Inas, and Ashley were in this salon for maybe half an hour or more or less, because I wasn't only taking photos, I was shooting video that day as well. And so in the course of shooting videos, because I always had a camera pointed at them, but they know us and we know them, so they were just comfortable. They always like, oh, this strange woman is coming to point a camera at us again. We're just gonna continue doing what we do. But after a while we were filming, everybody in the frame here started laughing. There were other women who came in just because they were curious to see what was going on. They came in and then they started talking, and then they all started laughing. And Inas also started laughing. And so Ashley and I were looking at her and going, what's going on? Inas said, well, they just asked if you were recording sound because they are talking about very, very naughty things that they don't necessarily want anybody to hear about. So yeah. I like women talk about, whatever women talk about, in the same way men talk about whatever it is men talk about. It's the same everywhere around. We have the same conversations in the privacy of our homes and our safe spaces. So very, very often we are privy to a lot of this, and it's just nice to share a laugh, nice to share a joke or two with people. And that's one of the parts of building hope, because hope's not, it's not like, you sit around and hope for stuff. Hope is action. When you're building something for yourself, that's what gives you hope, something to look forward to tomorrow and next week and the month after and the years after. So I just also wanted to say something to Asif, who spoke earlier. So Asif, you mentioned that you were a little scared to talk to me. I will say that coming in to speak in front of scholars from the Middle Eastern Institute is incredibly intimidating. I mean, look, I'm a photographer. You guys actually study this stuff. So the feeling is very much mutual.
I like what you said about, building, it's not only about a one-off thing. You guys actually go there and, build the relationship, and you sustain it long after the initial sort of first contact. There's a lot of following up down the line. When these IDPs when these IDPs leave the camps, do you guys also do the follow up, following from there? I mean, how do they rebuild not just their lives, but their homes and communities?
I mean, we try to. We've had several business owners that have closed their businesses in camp because they're going back to where they came from to rebuild. Now, for a lot of the men and women that come from towns where ISIS, that ISIS destroyed, should I say? I mean, they may or may not have homes to go back to. If they have homes, maybe the inside of the home is completely gutted, maybe the furniture is taken. So they do, a lot of the time, they do rebuild from scratch. We, over the years that my organization has been in Iraq, we've absolutely followed up with people we've helped. Because, after a while, when you spend that many years talking with people, sharing, you share bits of your life with them, they share bits of your life with you. You know a lot about each other, you become friends. So when we follow up with people, it's also because they're our friends and we want to know that, they're doing well, or if they have difficulties, or if we can help in any way. Sometimes they turn around, they help us. So yeah, there's no, each relationship is different. So how you visit with them, how you are in relationship with them, all that's different from person to person.
Did you have to deal with the authorities? In your work with the refugee camps?
Because we're a registered organization, of course, you have to deal with registration and authorities. I don't, because I was field staff, but certainly our founders who also live in Iraq, they deal with government officials, the UN, other partner organizations, etc. Because when an emergency happens, when there's a change of rules in the government, stuff like that, you need to deal with officials. Ehsan, who's here, has also as part of his role also helps out in that capacity. So yeah.
Oh, you've been back since
March
this year. Looking at Iraq right now, this is more a personal question for you, but are you hopeful for what you see? Hopeful for the country's future based on what you've seen so far during your time there?
Wow, I don't know. I'm not a scholar, so Iraq is going through a lot right now. The tensions between the US and Iran don't help anything. I don't know though, because I'm not a political analyst. I think I have hope for the people that I know in Iraq. I have hope for Buthina, I have hope for Amuna, because they, the troopers, the champions, they try every day. What that means for the country, I really couldn't tell you. I'm really not in a position to say. So, but I think we should never give up hope for a country, because a country is its people. And Iraqis are nothing if not incredibly resilient and creative people. So there are tons of businesses and things in Iraq right now that are starting that might change the world one day. So I would say never give up hope. Never consider a place, a person, an entire people as lost. Because humanity thrives. It's what we do.
Thanks, Charlene. I think Ihsan has a question. He's got his hand raised. Ihsan, go ahead.
Thank you. Hi, Charlene. I don't think it's a question. I just wanted to say thank you for everything you've done and you still do for Iraq, and to help Iraqis and to bring this hopeful image of the country and its people. and also to acknowledge how amazing you are as a person and as a colleague. And we and Iraq really miss you here. And I believe all the families who just shared their stories are missing you too. I think that shows how big the impact and the relationship you built and you made with these women and their families. Yeah, I'm so grateful for you, my friend. And I hope to see you again here in Iraq soon.
Thank you, Ihsan. You know, I think you and I have nerded about so much camera stuff over the last almost 2 years now that I sometimes often forget. Like, okay, I often joke about the fact, so to everybody else, Ihsan is my colleague, the person whom you've seen in some of my slides. We are really nerdy, and we nerd out about stuff all the time. We still do. But you know, if I've ever called somebody a brother from another mother, it will be Ihsan. He's been a friend to me. He's been an amazing colleague. He is also the person who constantly shows me how to level up in my craft. And he and so many others in Iraq have been my inspiration every day. Because, you know, when I'm going through a hard time, like COVID has had a little bit of an impact on me. And, you know, when I first got back, I was quite depressed for a little while. And I was just wallowing in it, going, oh my God, you know, life is, you know, so hard, this, that, and the other. In Singapore, we really, compared to a lot of the world, have not suffered too much. Certainly times are hard for people here, and a lot of vulnerable people are having a hard time. But in general, as a country, I think we've not done too badly. And I always, during this time, I always think about the work my colleagues do. I think about how Ihsan always gets up and gets going every single day and goes, okay, what do we have to do today? It is literally our job to try and make the world better every single day. So let's get up and let's do this thing. So Ihsan, man, you still are an inspiration. Thank you very much for being my friend.
I've got a question from my colleague Sharon. She's asking, what's your advice for people who are interested in this kind of field work?
I don't actually have any advice. So I get asked a lot by photographers. So being a staff photographer in today's world is kind of like hen's teeth. It's extremely rare. And I get asked by photographers all the time, oh, you know, how did you get into this? It's not a very exciting answer I have for anyone. I've been following Preemptive Love for a little while. And honestly, I got this job because they posted the job. I sat for rounds of interviews. I went for a field test and they decided to hire me. That is literally how I got the job. I applied like any other job. So how I would say to get into this? Volunteer right at home. It doesn't, you don't have to go to Iraq or Iran or the Middle East or in any other embattled place to do it. There's plenty of need right here at home. There's a lot of grassroots communities doing the work of helping vulnerable people right here. So there's tons of opportunity to figure out how to make the world better right at our doorstep. So I just, you know, explore that.
Thanks, Charlene. So you've been back since March. What's next on the plate for you?
So I don't know. So right now, I mean, obviously I'm not in Iraq. So my job right now has changed to being one, officially I'm a staff writer at Preemptive Love. I don't know what's next for me. I don't think any of us do. I'm waiting for COVID to be over or at least somewhat dealt with, so it's safe to travel again, so I can go back to Iraq or travel elsewhere or something. But I don't know. Like I think like a lot of us, I'm just waiting to see what happens next and whenever it happens. So
Yeah, I think all of us are also kind of hanging. But well, I think there are no more questions. So I think we can. I hope everyone will join me in thanking Charlene once again for sharing her experiences so candidly. Your stories have been extremely fascinating. Your photographs amazing. Your experience is certainly a very inspiring one, and I want to wish you all the best for whatever comes your way next.
thank you so much for having me. It's an honor for me to be presenting at NUS MEI. So thank you so much.
The pleasure is ours. Our appreciation to our audience as well for their participation. Thank you for continuing to support the work of MEI even through COVID-19. Just a quick plug, if you're a film buff, we'll be running our Middle East Film Festival in February next year. That's going to be happening virtually, so do stay tuned for more details on that one. In the interim, though, we invite you to check out two very good films that both MEI and Singapore Film Society have partnered with the projector on. The Perfect Candidate, which is about an ambitious young female doctor who goes up against the patriarchal system in Saudi Arabia. And The Insult, which is about how a trivial personal conflict explodes into something much larger. These films are available for you to rent and watch on the projector's online platform, but there's also a discount if you use the promo code that is available on our MEI's website. So do check those out, and we hope that helps to kind of whet your appetite for the upcoming Middle East Film Festival. Okay, so that's all from us. Thanks again, Charlene. Have a good weekend, and bye-bye, everyone.